I haven't gotten a chance to meet yet, my name is Birdie, and I brought my kitchen with me today. Not really. I did ask my wife. Well, kind of told her I was going to use it. So it's just an empty room in the house right now. It's pretty great. Well, uh, I wonder how many of these do you guys have in your house? You don't have to say it out loud, but I would imagine everyone has at least one, if not four. It's all shapes and sizes. You see, the thing about tables is that they're pretty powerful. Tables are a powerful thing. And now, while they're simply put together, there's a top and four legs. A lot of significant moments in our lives happen around a table. You see, families will get together around a table and we eat a meal. Friends will reconnect around a table playing games and having community. I would imagine some of the hardest conversations maybe you have entered into in your life have happened around a table. I want you to think for a moment some of the most pivotal moments in your life. And I bet a few of those, if not all, happened with the table present. I think for myself, a few moments come to mind. Just over a year ago, as Wes mentioned, we signed to purchase a piece of property for Church Story. And we sat there as I watched Wes sign paper after paper after paper around a table. I also think back about a decade ago when I very first met Wes, my very first interview with him at a Waffle House. It was great. And here we are 10 years later, still working together. But that happened at a table. But whenever I'm in a room like this, one specific story comes to mind at a table. You see, it was sixth grade, little birdie, real nervous. I grew up with a pretty bad stutter, speech impediment, and so I was shy. Did not get to know people, did not talk to them often. And so as I walked into the cafeteria, that was not a five-star dining experience like this looks, okay? It was like the insulation's coming from the ceiling, probably dipping into the hamburger a little bit. I don't know. Uh, but as I walk into the cafeteria, I remember my heart beating so fast. I was so nervous. New school, first day, sixth grade. I had a new haircut. My head, it looked like I ran into a wall. It was just stuck straight up. Thought it was cool. Wasn't cool. Uh, but I walk in, and as you walk into the cafeteria in Tommy Spear Middle School, probably never heard of it. Doesn't even exist anymore, actually, because of asbestos. Anyway, so you walk in the front. There's a little hallway, and then you turn to the right. And as you turn to the right, you have to walk past every single cafeteria table before you get to the place where there's food. And as I am walking down this path, I'm looking frantically for anybody that looks nice. Like, come on, somebody, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me. As I walk through, I get my food. It's a very nutritious Crispita with green beans and a milk. This Crispita is pretty good. And so I'm walking slowly through the cafeteria, just hoping somebody see me. And there they are. Someone waves me over. Hey, 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 we have a seat. You see, the significance about a table is when someone invites us to come and take a seat, they're doing more than just inviting us a place to eat. They're inviting us to a place to belong. You see, at the table, we answer one of the most pivotal questions in our hearts. An answer to a question that every one of us deeply want to solve. It's the question that's under our ambitions, the question that is under our insecurities and underneath all of our relationships. And it's this question right here: where do I belong? It's at the table that we can find belonging. Because one of our deepest needs as human beings is to understand where I fit in, to where I matter, where am I seen? You see, when someone says sit here, they're giving us a place to belong. And we see all throughout the scriptures, all throughout the Bible, time and time and time again, God uses a table to discuss belonging. We see it in the Old Testament in Exodus chapter 25. You don't have to flip there, we won't read it. But in Exodus chapter 25, God gives instructions to Moses on how to build the tabernacle. And one of the very first pieces of furniture that God tells Moses to build is what? The table. It's called the table of the presence, or the showbread table. And he goes in Exodus chapter 25 for 8 verses describing in great detail what this table is supposed to look like. How long, how tall, what it's made of. Now, think about that for a moment. In the middle of the tabernacle, the place where God is said to dwell physically among his people, right at the center, he puts a table. The table of the presence, or as I said, the showbread table. On this table were to be 12 loaves of bread, each loaf representing a tribe of Israel. Where God was saying every tribe, every family, every person belongs at my table. You have a place. And as we fast forward to the New Testament, we see time and time and time again, Jesus circles around a table with the most unlikely of people: fishermen, tax collectors, the people that the religious leaders would avoid. Jesus comes and he sits at a table alongside them. You see, the incredible thing about tables is they reveal the heart of God. When we think about him offering his presence to the people, God is doing more than just saying, come and eat. He's giving the Israelites a place to belong, ushering them over to the king's table, to take a seat where we have a place, we have a position. It's exactly what Jesus does again and again. And the story we're going to look at today, it's found in 2 Samuel chapter 9. And as you probably guessed it, it's a story about a table. And in this story, we meet 4 characters. And I would encourage you to write them down. They'll be on the screen. But the first is Saul. Saul was the very first king of Israel. So Saul was a mighty king, strong king, looked like a king, acted like a king for the most part. But Saul was the first king of Israel. The second character is Jonathan. Jonathan is the second character, and Jonathan was the son of Saul. And alongside Jonathan is this guy named David, who you've likely heard of. David, the second king of Israel, and the best friend of Jonathan. Then the fourth, probably the least known of all of these, is this man named Mephibosheth. All have a seat at the king's table. And the centerpiece of everything we're going to talk about today, it comes down to you asking yourself this question: which seat am I in? You see, all of us, just like God had invited the Israelites, all of us have been invited to a table to sit, to commune with the Lord of all lords, the King of kings, with Jesus. Invited into relationship with him, to come and sit with him at his table. And these 4 individuals approach the table with a very different perspective and reveal a certain posture of our hearts that all of us can step into from time to time. These 4 perspectives answering the question, which seat am I in? The first seat is that of Saul. You see, the thing about Saul, as I said, Saul was strong. He was tall. Saul looked like a king. But as we consider with Saul, we see that not only did he look like a king, but he was probably the perfect king for this people. And Saul had a focus on who God was calling him to be for a time, leading the Israelites. However, that suddenly had changed. You see, Saul, once seeking after God, at a moment, everything changed because his seat is the seat of entitlement. And it all changed at a battle. You see, at the battle, there's this young shepherd boy that shows up, David. David goes out into the field and he fights this giant named Goliath. You've probably heard the story. And as David comes out, knowing that God is on his side, what he does is he defeats the giant, and then the people call him a hero. But not only is he a hero, these people begin singing songs about David. And not just any song. In fact, we see one in 1 Samuel chapter 18. It says, the women sang as they played and said, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Now imagine you're Saul. You're the king. You've led the army. You physically led them into battle, leading the way. You've fought the battles, and then suddenly someone is celebrating someone else. And it's in this moment that something inside Saul cracks. Instead of celebrating what God is doing through David, Saul begins to see himself in comparison to David. He starts to see David as a threat. In comparison, begins to eat at Saul's heart, eating away little by little. In comparison, it's dangerous. The thing about comparison is that it rarely stays neutral, because comparison slowly turns into jealousy. Jealousy slowly turns into insecurity. And insecurity, when fully grown, turns into control. And that is what Saul is doing. He is trying to control. Once someone leading the Israelites valiantly has become suspicious, he's become defensive, he's become paranoid, and he has become controlling. We're told there are even times when Saul throws spears at David out in the field. He's trying to kill him. Think how far Saul has drifted. His army is terrified of this giant. And this young boy from his kingdom comes, saves the day, protects the army, and now he hates him. Why? It's because Saul sits in the seat of entitlement. He sees that he believes that he owns the seat that he is in. This seat is his. He belongs here. He deserves this. Saul represents the posture of the heart that every one of us can fall into from time to time. That I deserve my seat. I have earned my seat. This is mine. Listening to the voice that whispers, the opportunity ahead should be mine. I've earned it. I've done more. I've cared more. The recognition should be mine. You see, what happens with Saul is he gets so hyper fixated on his seat that he completely forgets what God has called him to begin with. He's not worried about anything other than protecting his seat. You see, when we step into entitlement, people stop becoming partners and they start to become competition. Where someone else's success means your failure. Someone else's growth feels like something is being taken away from you. When we feel a sense of entitlement, other people's opportunity feel like we've lost something. And suddenly the table that's meant to bring us together becomes a place where we defend our positions, where we're up in arms, guarding our chair like Saul. If we're honest, many of us have sat in this seat before. I know I have. It was about 8 years, maybe 7 years ago, that I had been working at a church for a little while, and I was working as hard as I could. I was putting in extra hours in my off time. I was reading, I was learning, growing, trying to learn from other people. I mean, I was putting in all of this work so I could have a seat at the table, pun intended, to where I could sit in the room where the conversations that mattered happened. I wanted my spot. And so I was putting in the work. doing everything I could to get there. And I feel like there comes this point when I'm finally about to step into this spot, and I'm pumped. Like, I earned this. And out of nowhere, this guy I had never met, never heard of, shows up. He's hired. And he has my seat. And now I wish as a pastor I could tell you that I was like, oh, good for him. That's awesome. No, that seat is mine. That belongs to me. I've been here longer. I've worked harder. I've cared more. I know I'm smarter. All of this list of long things of why that should be mine. That is the seat of entitlement. You see, I was so focused on getting my seat that I had completely lost sight of the mission that God had called me to. My job wasn't to protect a seat. It was to point people toward a Jesus who has created a table centered on grace, not on pride. That's exactly what happened to Saul. He stopped seeing the bigger picture of what God was doing. See, the thing about the seat of entitlement, it's centered on pride, and what pride does is it fights for the seat. Pride fights to have its seat at the table. But grace reminds us that the table, it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. The table we are invited to is Jesus's table, not ours. When we stop fighting for a seat, when we let grace take a front seat, instead of guarding our position, instead of comparing ourselves to others, we might find ourselves in a different seat. Because as I mentioned, Saul had a son, and his son's name was Jonathan. Now, when you think about Saul being the king, after the king is no more, who's the next king? Well, it's usually their son. And so if you consider the table, the king's table that people are invited to, who more than anyone deserves a seat at the table? Jonathan. His entire future was centered on one thing, the throne. His entire life revolved around it. And much like me, out of nowhere comes someone else. Who's this guy? It's David. Yet Jonathan sits in a different seat entirely. He sits in the seat of loyalty. You see, when Jonathan could have very easily defended his seat, defended his position, defended his future throne, he decided to do something differently. He saw something in David that most others could not see, that they could not recognize. In fact, Jonathan gets incredibly close to David and even makes him a promise, the covenant. We read about it in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 3. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his military gear, including his sword, his bow, and his belt. You see, these gifts that Jonathan is giving to David, they're not random. They're signs of loyalty, symbolism. The robe represents authority. The military gear representing leadership and protection. Jonathan gives this to David, and what he is saying to David is, I see something in you. I see that our God is at work in and through you, and I'm not going to fight against it. I'm going to support it. It is clear that God is doing something through you, and I want to be a part of it. The seat of loyalty. Not loyalty to one another. Loyalty to the calling that God had put on his heart. You see, Saul protects his seat. Whereas Jonathan, he honored God's calling. He saw that God was doing something in someone else. And instead of trying to push him down, he lifted him up. Those that sit in the seat of Jonathan are lifting others up. They don't see someone else's success as a failure to them. Their success is your success. Their job is to find the future, to lift them up, to raise them up into positions so they can utilize their gifting for the kingdom of God. You see, the person that sits in this seat says, "Come and sit with me." You've been invited to a seat at the table. Did David deserve it? No. He's a lowly shepherd boy who threw a rock at a giant. Big deal. Jonathan sees something in him and says, "Come and sit with us." You see, the kingdom of God is about much more than taking our seat. It's not about protecting our position, it's about participating in what God is already doing. And that's what Jonathan sees, that's what Jonathan does. He chooses to support his friend David. Whenever I think about my life sitting in a different seat, I know that a lot of the reason I'm here even now, it's happened from moments that changed my life, from people that invited me to the table. I can think back of a few people in my life that invited me into conversations that I didn't feel qualified to be into. And honestly, I wasn't qualified. But they saw something in me before I even saw something in myself. And I'll be honest, I didn't aspire to work at a church, to be a pastor. I didn't feel a sense of, like, I hear pastors say all the time, and this is great. I believe them. Like, "Oh yeah, God called me to be a pastor when I was 14." It's cool. I didn't get that. And so running from it. Saying, I want to do something else. I want to go teach. I like languages. I'll teach people about Greek because that's relevant for all of us. We'll talk about history, about the Persian Empire. I'll talk about them for hours because everyone cares. That's what I wanted. The people saw something in me I didn't even see in myself and saying, I believe that God is calling you towards something. Just be open to it. You see, that's what the seed of Jonathan does. It sees potential in others and it lifts them up. It doesn't push them down, even if that means they end up in your position. See, the thing with Jonathan is his story doesn't end like you would expect. Jonathan never becomes king. Jonathan is killed in battle. Jonathan and his father Saul are killed in a battle, and that leaves one person left to take the throne. And his name's David. You see, David is now in a place of authority. He's in charge. And he has a really important decision to make. When we think about David, he spent years running from Saul, hiding in the wilderness, afraid. And time spent through trials, through difficulty, can lead us in one to two places. It can lead us in this place of gratefulness of what God has brought us through, or it can leave us in this place of bitterness, where David has a choice to make. And we see something incredible in the very first verse in 2 Samuel chapter 9. We're going to spend the rest of our time together. David asks a simple question. Then David said, is there anyone still left in the house of Saul, so that I could show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? This question's astonishing because David is sitting in the seat of mercy. What's interesting about this day and age is that if a new king comes into power, he completely wipes out the entire family that was part of the previous dynasty. The entirety. Because if anyone is still alive in that family, they would have a claim to the throne. And you want to wipe out any chance of that happening. And so every new king, what they would do is they would come in and they would kill the entire family. Kids, old, doesn't matter the age, they'd get rid of all of them. But not David. You see, the wilderness could have made him bitter and want some retribution, to get rid of all of Saul's family for how Saul treated him. Yet David also made a promise to his friend Jonathan. Jonathan invited him to a seat at the table. David extends mercy. So he asks, is there anyone left in the house of Saul so that I could show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And that word kindness, you've probably heard me say it before. I say it all the time. My wife says I say it too much. But it's this Hebrew word chesed, love. And the reason the Hebrew word is important is because it does not translate into English very well at all. You may see it translated loving kindness, loving mercy, gentle mercy, loyal love. What it is it's the kind of love, the faithful, loyal, intimate love that God shows his people. So, what David is asking, is there anyone in the family of Saul that I can show the kindness of God toward? And there is one. There's one that is left. Someone seemingly forgotten, someone hiding, someone who believes that they no longer belong even near the table. And it's this man by the name of Mephibosheth. Now, for Mephibosheth, he was in a pretty difficult spot. You see, as he's born, Mephibosheth is the grandson of a king, royalty. However, his father and his grandfather, as I mentioned earlier, die in battle. And at that time, Mephibosheth is at the age of 5, and tragedy strikes immediately. You see, for Mephibosheth, when the news had spread about what had happened to his father and grandfather, the royal household panics. Why? Well, they know what happens when a new king takes over. They panic. They think someone is going to come to try and kill Mephibosheth. So what happens is his nurse grabs him, picks him up, and starts running. And as she's running, she drops him, breaking both of his feet, leaving him crippled for the rest of his life. Moral of the story, don't run with a 5-year-old. But crippled in both feet, unable to walk. We read about this character, Mephibosheth, where at one moment he is a prince, and the next his entire life is turned upside down. In fact, in 2 Samuel chapter 9, it says that he lives in this place called Lo Devar, which literally means a place of nothing. No pasture, no productivity, no promise. It was the kind of place that people went when life had passed them by. Mephibosheth is forgotten, he is hidden, and he is broken, and not just physically, emotionally and spiritually. Mephibosheth has nothing. And then one day, he gets a message from the king. I want to see you. Now, if you're Mephibosheth, what are you thinking? No, I'm not going. I know how this ends. You don't invite me over for a tea party. You're going to kill me. Terrified. But Mephibosheth, he goes. He shows up. We see in verse 6, Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and prostrated himself. And David said, Mephibosheth. He said, here is your servant. You see, when Mephibosheth shows up, he's expecting judgment. He's expecting death. He's expecting the end of his life. He doesn't know what to do. But David, sitting in the seat of mercy, shows him a different way. It continues in verse 7. Then David said to him, do not be afraid, for I will assuredly show kindness, chesed, to you, for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of your grandfather Saul. And you yourself shall eat at my table regularly. What? Imagine hearing that. Instead of punishment, he receives restoration. Instead of rejection, he receives belonging. Instead of death, he receives a seat at the king's table. No longer in hiding, no longer without a family. But Mephibosheth struggles to believe it, because the seat that Mephibosheth is in is the seat of shame. for shame has consumed everything about his life. He responds in disbelief for the position that he has just been put in. You've just been told by the king that you are not going to be killed. And you get to eat at my table. You get a feast at my table. And this is how he responds. And again, he prostrated himself and he said, what is your servant that you should be concerned about a dead dog like me? Shame has rewritten his identity. He no longer saw himself as a prince, no longer worthy, unwanted, undeserving, and broken. And if we're honest, many of us can feel like that too. Where there's something in our past, some shame that we carry, a regret that we're holding on to. That when Jesus invites us to come and dine, to come and sit at his table, we say, no, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve a spot. I've done too much wrong. We've completely misunderstood the concept of the table. The reality is, none of us belong at the table. We didn't earn a spot to be there. What the seat of Saul says is that I have been entitled to my position because of my hard work. What Jonathan does is he says, I'm going to draw other people to it because I understand a key concept that the table is not my own, it is God's. It is by grace that I have been brought to the table. But the seat of shame is the exact opposite of Saul. This says I've done so much to earn it. This says I have done so much to remove myself from any opportunity to sit at the table. Like if you knew what I had done, you would know that I don't belong. But David responds with grace, brings him to the table anyway. And we see this incredibly powerful verse, verse 11. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table as one of the king's sons. Did you catch that? Not as a guest, not as an outsider, not as a charity case, as one of the king's sons. Chesed. That's what that love does. You belong at the table, not because you earned it, but because God has invited us to it. But it doesn't just end with us getting our seat at the table. And I think that's the key mistake we make in our day and age and in our culture. Many of us are guilty of. That we think if I just get to the table, then it's over. Like I've accomplished it. But there's more. Mephibosheth would have never ended up at the table if David hadn't invited him in. And this is where many of us sit in our culture. That's where shame will lead us to oftentimes. Technically, I'm in the room. I'm present. I'm close. I'm close to community. I'm close to the church. I'm close to this grace that's offered. I'm close to the love. But here I am. Just kind of waiting for someone to invite me to the table. You see, when we think about our responsibility as followers of Jesus, it's to see those and invite them in. To focus on the nuns, and I don't mean the ladies that are stereotypically mean. Did you know that a third of our culture on a religious survey would say that their religious affiliation is none? That's what I'm talking about. How many people are in our lives sitting over here all by themselves with no one around, no one seeing them, filled with shame? There's not a God that loves me, that cares about me. This is your responsibility. If you call yourself a follower of Jesus, you have the responsibility to care for these. You've not been invited to the table to get comfortable. Eat, dine, gather with the church. But the mission of God isn't about just sitting comfortably at the table, talking with other people at the table. It's about seeing those and drawing them in, expanding the scope of the table. You see, the reality of this table is these four seats, while important, are not the most important. Verse 12. Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. Why is that in there? Why does it matter? Well, it's because grace gave you a seat. But love grabs the seat for another. Micah is the next generation, the next person to be invited to the table. He doesn't just happen there. He doesn't just get there on his own. Micah is significant because it shows us that love is to multiply. Love is to expand the table, welcoming more and more. So we can get so focused on our chair, our seat, our position. And some of these are significant. But I fear too often we end up like Saul or we end up like Mephibosheth, entitled to our spot or feeling like we have no place in it. What God is calling us toward is to be like Jonathan and David. Now, important note on David. Was David perfect? He did a good thing, right? He invited Mephibosheth to have a seat at the table, but he wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, significant mistakes, life-altering mistakes. You see, David didn't earn his seat at the table. Grace gave him the seat. And grace gives you the seat as well. You do nothing to earn it, do nothing to unearn it. It is all centered on a grace, by faith, that we can sit and dine with the King of all kings, the Lord of lords. But it doesn't end with getting to the table. We see entitlement, loyalty, mercy, and shame. But at the end of the day, my responsibility, your responsibility, if you're a follower of Jesus, is to see these neighbors, coworkers, loved ones, and care. Invite them in. And I'm not just saying invite them to church. It's a great step. Invite them into relationship, into community. We're really good at telling people things about Jesus, but we need to show them through our actions. We want to do that as a church as well. Wes mentioned it earlier, for the city. That's what that is all about. There are kids, there are families in our own city who do not have a place to sleep. They sleep on a floor, maybe a pallet, a couple blankets. Sleep in Heavenly Peace is doing incredible work because they don't want to see any kid go without just because of how they were born, just because of what they were born into. So we're going to partner with this organization, pay for the beds, and then we're going to build them. No prior experience needed. I'm not a builder. I just stamped things with a hot iron. It's about being the hands and feet of Jesus, to saying, you matter. How did the disciples change the scope of the world? Through living out the work that Jesus had showed them. And after relationship had been established, after work had been done, they then entered into conversations. Building these beds is about so much more than just putting them together and patting ourselves on the back. It's allowing sleep in Heavenly Peace and those partnering together to go into someone's home, to show them the love of Jesus, and possibly, just possibly, enter into a conversation. This isn't just an opportunity. You're responsible for it. God asks for our obedience in serving Him. Because again, grace gave you a seat. But love pulls out a chair, pulls out a seat for another.